Good morning. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn with me to Psalm chapter 24. Psalm chapter 24. You know, this is one of my favorite days of the year because I get a giant wall. I'm very excited about it. I told someone jokingly that I've been listening to Pink Floyd's album, The Wall, all week just in preparation. So, Psalm chapter 24, and what we're going to do today, if you want to take some markers, we're going to be in 3 chapters today. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 24. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 26, and then we're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 1. That's it. There are going to be no verses on the screen. This is a paper reading day. Despite the giant wall, we're going to be in the paper today. So the context of what we have in 1 Samuel chapter 24 is David has been serving for King Saul faithfully for years. And you got to remember the relationship that David has with King Saul. So David and King Saul are not only friends at one point, it is Jonathan's father, who is David's very best friend, and then David marries Saul's daughter. So he has lived in Saul's house, been best friends with Saul's son, and is now married to Saul's daughter. And what is David doing? Well, David's fighting on Saul's behalf constantly. But when we get to chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, Saul switches on David and is running after him, trying to kill him. So, that's a little bit of the context of 1 Samuel 24, which we'll get to in just a minute. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this, have you ever gone through the Bible and seen different phrases and wondered why those phrases are there? What I mean by that is, if you go to 1 Samuel chapter 13, which we're not going to have to turn to, but in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, Samuel tells Saul that the kingdom is slipping away from you. And why is the kingdom slipping away from you? Because God is looking for someone after His own heart. So often we say that David had the heart of God, right? But if you go through the life of David and you look at some of his mistakes, you might ask yourself, well, how is it that this guy has the heart of God? You know, how is it that this guy is really like God? You know, he's kind of marching to the beat of his own drum a lot of the time, but don't let the mistakes fool you. What we're going to see throughout this lesson is the heart of God as seen through David's actions. This morning we are going to be considering 1 Samuel chapter 24, 1 Samuel chapter 26, and 2 Samuel chapter 1, considering how it is that we are to take the high road. Now, the theme of our VBS is Heaven's Highway, so I thought it was fitting to be speaking on something about the high road, but when we use this term, the high road, what do we mean? Well, that means, when our enemies go low, we go high. When people try to put us down, we don't fight back, we just deal with it. And it's part of what God expects us to do. You know, I appreciate the reading that was done a minute ago from the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 41, we are told if somebody's going to mistreat you, just go through it. Go through it. If somebody is going to ask you to go 1 mile, go 2. If somebody's going to sue you and take your tunic, give them your cloak also. Try to turn the other cheek. Be the better person. And I genuinely believe that throughout this story in 1 Samuel, that we're going to see that through the life of David. So I've had you go to 1 Samuel chapter 24, and for this we're going to consider that the high road is a one-way street. Okay, when we think of the high road, we might think of a big interstate or something like. No. It is a little small trail that goes through the mountains, and there's only one way. You can't have 2 cars on the road at the same time. And what I mean by that is that when we decide that we're going to take the high road and we're going to do the right thing and we're going to treat ourselves respectably and we're going to act like Christians and exemplify Christ in the things we do, it means that our desires and our wants go in the back seat. It's God's way or no way at all. So for this, I want you to go to 1 Samuel chapter 24. Let's take a look at verses 3 through 7. This is one of my favorite stories in the life of David. So starting in verse number 3, you're going to find David is hiding from Saul in a cave. So David and his men are in this cave, and Saul comes in. He enters the scene, okay? This is the movie that is the scene, the life of David. Here is the scene starting. Verse 3. Okay, and he came to the sheepfolds, by the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. And the men of David said, "Here is the day of the Lord." which the Lord has said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you. So then David arises stealthily and cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. And afterward, David's heart struck him, because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And he said to his men, The Lord forbid that I should put this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing the Lord's anointed. So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. Now that might not seem like much. That might seem like just a passing story. But there's a lot in that story. Because going back to our main point here, when David's will might have been to get this over with and to just end Saul's life, I don't have to run for my life anymore. I know that God is giving me the kingdom. You know, Samuel ensured of that God is going to give the kingdom to David. And here is now your opportunity. It looked like everything had lined up perfectly for this moment. And here is your enemy in the darkness of this cave. I can slay him and be gone. Nobody will even know it's me other than the people in the cave with me. And then you have the whispers in your ear saying, it's your time. It's your time to shine, buddy. Get up there and do your job. And David gets over there and he stealthily cuts off a corner of his robe and turns around and says, No, let this be a lesson to you who are watching me. I'm going to be the bigger person here. I'm going to choose God's way over my way. I'm going to do the right thing even though this is the convenient thing. So in that moment, David chose the high road. And it was a one-way road. It was God's way, not David's way. There's so much that we can take away from this in our personal lives. Sometimes we are put in situations that we want to get revenge, that we want to be, treated fairly, and rightfully so. We should want to be treated fairly, but sometimes it doesn't shake out that way, does it? And we have opportunities set before us where we could really harm someone else, whether it be emotionally with our words, whether it be, financially with maybe an employer or an employee at work. There are opportunities we are given where we are put in David's position, where we have somebody that doesn't like us and that have mistreated us, and it's our time to shine. It's our time to get out the sword and take care of business. But in those moments, if you're truly concerned about taking the high road, as did Christ, you'll take a corner of the road, and you'll learn from that. Now, we're going to rush through these two main points, and in the third point, we're going to bring it all home, and so we're going to spend most of the time on that. But let's go on to point number 2. So number 1, the high road is a one-way street. Number 2, on the high road, there are no U-turns. Now, for this, we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 26. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me there. 1 Samuel chapter 26. So after David spares Saul's life in 1 Samuel 24, do you think that Saul was appreciative? Well, seemingly he is, and we'll get to that in just a minute. We'll finish both of these stories in point number 3. But Saul seemingly is very appreciative of what David has done in chapter 24. But in chapter 26, guess what? Saul does it again. So in chapter 26, David is running through the wilderness. And here Saul chases him into the wilderness to kill him once again. So when you go down to verse 7 through 12, you're going to see a second story like to the first story in chapter 24. Start with me in verse number 7 of chapter 26. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, that is Saul's army. And there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment, with the spear stuck in the ground and at his head. And Abner and the army lay around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. I'll be quick and ethical, is what he says. I'll take care of business. So David said, verse 9, to Abishai, "Do not destroy him. For who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" And David said, "As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die. He will go down to battle and perish. And the Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is at his head and the jar of water, and let's go." So David took the spear and the jar of water at Saul's head, and they went away. And no man saw it or knew it, nor did any awake, for they were all asleep, because of a deep sleep from the Lord had fell upon them. So what do I mean by there's no U-turns on the high road? Well, okay, we have a situation where someone wrongs us. We think to ourselves, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to be the bigger person. And that works for the first time. But what if you have a repeat offender? What if you have somebody that continually pesters you? What if that person doesn't stop? What if that person recognizes the mercy that you've shown to them and that you have been the bigger person and they continue to be the smaller person? What about then? See, David is put in a situation not once, but twice, where everything lined up perfectly. We'd look at it and say, David, God's doing this. This is fate. This is it. The spear. Friends, think about that. The king is laying down with a spear 6 inches from his head. All it takes is boop, boop, and it's done. But David says, I'm not going to do it. His day will come. See, he will either go down into battle and die. The Lord will take care of him. That's not my job. I'm supposed to just to love him anyway. And really what you're going to see in point number 3 is that David does love him anyway. And that's hard to do. But as we in our personal lives are thinking about our interpersonal relationships and people who have done us wrong in the past, I could ask everybody in this room, somebody has done you wrong before. I guarantee you. Somebody, whether it's in your family, people that you grew up with, maybe it's people at church, maybe it's people at work, or if you're younger, if it's people at school, somebody's done you wrong. It's human nature. We do that to each other. So we all understand what difficulty David is faced with in this moment. But he's not faced with it once, but twice, where everything was perfect. But what does he do? He grabs the spear and he leaves in the dead of night. Now, let's bring this all home and tie all these points together and add it to 2 Samuel chapter 1. There are no shoulders on the high road. What do I mean by no shoulders? Well, if you are a driver, I know there are some people in here who aren't old enough to have a driver's license yet. If you see a road sign that says soft shoulder or no shoulder or low shoulder, what does that mean? That means there's nowhere to pull off, okay? That means the road stops abruptly and it's just straight into the ditch. So don't try to pull over on a soft shoulder, okay, kids? There's your driving lesson for the day. Now, for this point, I immediately thought of one thing. So pretty much everybody knows that I go hunting pretty much every year out in Colorado. I have been since I was a kid. My dad and I go elk hunting. When you go out there, there's one specific mountain near where we hunt. And in fact, if you're in the town, the nearest town, you can look up on this mountain and you can see a switchback. Everybody know what a switchback is, right? So a switchback is on the side of the mountain, you'll see a little zigzag, just little lines. That's a road. When I was probably 12, maybe 13 years old, my dad decided to take me down that switchback. So we had driven into the mountains the long way, and it's an easy drive. But once you get to the top, you can see the town. It's right there. So just take the road, and you'll save a lot of time. And I don't know, whatever day, I guess my dad was just ready to go to town, or, we were wanting to get out quickly. He said, hey, let's take that road. I was like, okay. It's a gravel road, and I kid you not, let's say our truck is, 8 feet wide. This thing is 8 feet and 6 inches wide. And my passenger seat, because we're going down, remember, he's riding comfy. He's got a big rock face next to him. I am looking down to sheer death the whole trip. And in fact, that specific switchback is so steep that the cars that have fallen off are still there. They're too hard to recover. And so you are seeing the tombs of the people below you. And my dad's saying, don't look down. I'm like, great. I feel great. I'm comfortable. Yeah. In fact, we had some guys from Arnold come with us hunting, last year and years before, and my dad's fun game is always to try to get them to go on this switchback. And he won't tell them or, whatever. It's like, hey, you should take that road. They're smart enough, though. But the point that I want to take away from that is there's no guardrails. There's no guardrails on the high road. What we're going to see through these next couple of examples is when David is really, people are trying to pull David off the high road. Now, you can already remember the two examples we've looked at before. The people in the cave, his men in the cave, they're whispering in his ear, this is your chance. You need to take this opportunity. And then you fast forward to the camp, the same thing. Hey, I can do it for you. Let me take the spear. I'll kill Saul for you. So you already have those people trying to pull David off the high road. And now we have these striking examples from Saul who try to pull him off the high road. So I want you to go back with me in your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 24. Okay, we were already there, but let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 24 and read this whole story. It's so much stronger and more powerful if you read the whole story. So start with me in verse 8, and we're going to go all the way to verse 22, okay? Okay, so at this point, David has already exited, or he had already cut off the robe of Saul. In verse 8, he exits. All right, so afterward, David also arises. And he went out of the cave and he called after Saul, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed. This is the guy that is trying to kill him. And when he comes out of the cave right after Saul, he goes, "Excuse me, my lord." And when Saul turns around, David is on the ground, bowing to him. He has his face to the earth and he pays homage. Verse 9. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, David seeks you harm'? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand in the cave. And some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put my hand out against the Lord's anointed, for he is against my Lord, he is the Lord's anointed." Verse 11. "See my father," and he calls him my father. Again, they're not blood, related by blood, but this is his father. He says, "My father, see, I have the corner of your robe in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong. There is no treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. May the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be against you. I mean you no harm, Saul. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes wickedness. But my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? A dead dog, after a flea. May the Lord therefore be the judge and give sentence between me and you. And see to it, plead my cause, deliver me from your hand." Now, here's where we get into the interesting part, verse 16. As soon as David finished speaking, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" As we're reading this, I want you to think of a proverb. Faithful are the wounds of an enemy, but deceitful are the kisses. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. And I want you to think about this as you're reading this. What does Saul say? Verse 17. Saul lifted up his voice and wept. "Is this my son David?" Verse 17. He said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. You have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you good for what you have done to me this day. And now behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Here's all I want you to do. Verse 21. Swear to me this day, therefore by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home. But David and his men went up to the stronghold. It's beautiful. That's perfect. So David spares Saul, and as soon as he makes himself known and comes out and says, Saul, turn around, Saul loses it. He's weeping. He says, you're a better man than I. I've done ill and evil towards you, and you've done nothing but kindness. You've shown nothing but kindness to me. You are a better person than me. You're going to be the king, David. And not only that, I know this is God's plan. God put you there to be the king. The only thing I ask of you, David, is that you don't cut off my lineage. Don't go after my family. I want to keep them preserved. That's a great story. That's the great ending to the story, if it was the ending. But it's not. Because what does Saul do 5 minutes after saying that? He chases after David again. So point number 2, when we talked about no U-turns and having a second opportunity, it hits a little bit harder now that you know the rest of the story from chapter 24. Because David, if he was naive, might have bought what Saul was saying there. Oh, well, he said it was all good. Let's shake hands. I guess I'll just ride home with you. You got room in the carriage? I'll just go home with you. But David was smarter than that. David was smarter than that, but he was going to do what was right anyway, even though he knew that Saul did not mean it. Even though the love was not reciprocated. David truly loves Saul. Saul does not love David. But David loves Saul in spite of the reciprocation. So again, I asked the question to start with. Have you ever read about David's heart and questioned, how does David truly have the heart of God? That's where you see God in David. It's when the love is not reciprocated and the kindness is not shown back to him, yet he is going to show it anyway. That's where the love of God is exemplified. Because in the same way, when God loves us and gives us His Son and does everything for His children and tries to treat us with the utmost respect and kindness, and then we turn around and spit in His face, He loves us in spite of that because He's on the high road. Right? So, let's consider 1 Samuel 24. Now let's fast forward to the second example. In 1 Samuel chapter 26. Start with me in verses 13, and we'll go down to verse 25. 1 Samuel 26, starting in verse 13. So, in this example, remember, Saul was laying here. He had a spear and a jug of water by his head. And instead of taking his life while he slept, David takes the jug of water and he takes the spear out of the ground. Start with me in verse 13. Then David went over to the other side. He stood afar off on top of the hill, with a great space between them. And David called to the army and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, "Will you not answer, Abner?" And Abner answered, "Who are you?" calls to the king. And David said to Abner, "Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came to destroy the king your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you have not kept watch over your Lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is in the jar of water that was at his head." So stop right there. Before you read verse 17, did you catch that? So in this revealing of himself, when David finally wakes everybody up in Saul's army and says, "Hey, there's a guy over here," the first thing he does is rebuke the guy who was supposed to be protecting the king. He goes, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be like the king's bodyguard? Isn't there no one like you? Aren't you supposed to be the best in Israel?" "Well, yeah, I am." "You should be put to death because look at this. Look at what I got." He was going to die under your watch. Do a better job. He protects Saul from within. From within. He's rebuking somebody who is a direct enemy, trying to protect Saul. He says, "You need to do a better job protecting Saul." Now, verse 17. Saul, recognizing David's voice, said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" Oh, here comes the niceties. Here comes the fake. And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." He said, "Why does my Lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is on my hands?" Remember, just two chapters ago, he had told David, "You're a better man than me. You've done nothing but niceness to me. You're going to have the kingdom." Yet here David is having to ask the same question that he asked 2 chapters ago. What have I done? Why are you running after me? What have I done to you? What evil is on my hands? Verse 19. "Now therefore, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is men, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day, that I should have no share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, 'Go serve other gods.' Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth, away from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single fleet, one who hunts a partridge in the mountains." He's trying to downplay his role. Remember, the whole reason why Saul is after David is because of that little saying everybody kept saying, that David has killed his 10,000s. Now, Saul's killed his thousands, but David is his 10,000s. So it was jealousy that Saul pursues David with. And so here, David is downplaying his character. "I'm nothing. I'm just a flea. I'm one just going after birds in the mountain. Why are you going after me? I'm a dead dog," is what he said in chapter 24. Verse 21. "Then Saul said this," watch this, "I have sinned. I've sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more seek your life to harm you." I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do it again. "I've sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly. I've made a great mistake." And David answered and said, "Here is the spear, O king. Let one of your young men come over and take it. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. The Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put my hand out against you, the Lord's anointed. Behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so my life may be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he deliver me out of all tribulation." Then Saul said to David, "Blessed be you, my son. You will do many things and succeed in them." So David went away, and Saul returned to his place. How difficult must it have been to be in David's shoes, to hear those words and know it was a lie as it was being said? Has someone ever told you something and you knew it was a lie before it left their mouth? They looked you dead in the eye and they said something that just wasn't true. And here David has picked the high road 2 times in a row. And if you combine all of the things that Saul has said about David, you would think they're best friends. "I have sinned. I've done you wrong. I won't do this again. I can be better. I'll try again. I'm not going to do this again. You're going to be the king. You're going to do great things. You're wonderful. I'm so proud of you. You're my son. I love you. You are precious." That's what Saul says. But what does he mean? He's saying it through gritted teeth. He can't stand David. He's mad. And the worst part about it is David knows all that. He understands that. But again, he's taking the high road in spite of, not because of. And this is where it all comes to a head. Here's where it all comes to a point. What's going to happen next? So we have Psalm 24, David spares Saul in a cave. Psalm 26, I bet I've said Psalm 400 times today, have I not? Man, 1 Samuel 24, David spares Saul in a cave. 1 Samuel 26, David spares Saul in the camp. What happens in 1 Samuel chapter 27? Yeah, Saul's back at it. He's trying to kill David again. In fact, when we first met David, I mean way, way back, What was David famous for? Well, he was a shepherd boy who answered a call to defeat Goliath of Gath, the king or the best soldier of the Philistines. And he took those 5 stones out of the babbling brook and he put them in his bag and he went into battle and he did his thing, and that started the story of David. Guess who David goes to live with in 1 Samuel chapter 27? The Philistines. The Philistines. David moves in with the Philistines to get away from Saul. That's how bad it was. Have you ever been put in a situation where you have to pick of your 2 worst enemies and you pick the lesser of the 2 evil? That's what David was put into. That's the situation. And he literally says in 1 Samuel chapter 27, well, Saul won't chase me here. Saul had just finished saying, I love you, I'll never do this again. You're my best friend, I'm so happy for you. And the very next thing that David does is run to his worst enemy to protect him. That's sad. But David knew. David knew that Saul was lying. So, fast forward, what happens? David, he goes and lives with the Philistines for a while. He battles alongside them. He's not bothering them. They're not bothering him. He's working with them. He's being cooperative. He's trying to earn his keep, if you will. Now, they know who he is, but it doesn't really bother them. But then there comes a point where they're going into battle, and some of the Philistines look around and they see David, and they say, well, who are these Hebrews? And they say, well, he's David. He's been with us for a while. He goes, I don't trust him. I don't trust him because if we're in a battle with his former people, he might switch sides on us. So David, you got to go. David, you got to go. So David leaves. He leaves this story. Well, the Philistines go on and they start a battle with guess who? Saul. And Saul dies. In fact, in this battle, it wasn't just Saul that died, but it was David's best friend, Jonathan. Both of them die in battle. Here's where we get to the whole point of all this. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 1. 2 Samuel chapter 1. And I want you to read the sincerity and the hurt that David is going through. We're going to start in verse 17 and we're going to go all the way through to verse 24. When David hears the news that Saul, his enemy, has fallen by the sword, you would think that David's going to throw a party, that he's going to kill the fatted calf, that it's going to be celebration, because guess what? I don't have to run for my life anymore. You know what kind of relief that is? I can go to sleep at night and not worry if I hear a noise, that somebody is trying to sneak into our camp to cut my head off. I don't have to worry about that. That's a great way to live free. But that's not David's reaction. Verse 17, David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son. And he said, it should be taught to all the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. He said, your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughter of the uncircumcised exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew on you, or rain, nor fields of offering. For the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul was not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain to the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. You daughters of Israel, weep over Saul. You who clothe you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ointments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain in your high places. Does that sound like David is talking about an enemy? When Saul said all those nice things to David, he didn't mean it. You're great. The kingdom's going to be yours. You're a better man than I. You're righteous. When David said those things about Saul, he meant it. And that's what it really looks like to take the high road. When we talked about that last point there, the high road has no shoulder. Saul gave David every opportunity and every reason to jump off that high road, to take the easy path and to take care of business. But David stayed on that little, narrow switchback of a high road. And he really meant what you just read. He said, Saul was wonderful. I'm glad that Gath doesn't know about it. I'm glad that Ashkelon doesn't know about it. I don't want anybody to even rejoice. I'm not rejoicing. I don't want any of his enemies to rejoice in hearing the news of his death. Weep over him, Israel. They were swifter than eagles and stronger than lions. And he mourned for a guy that did not love him. So when we ask that question, how was it that David had the heart of God? That's how. To love your enemies. To treat them better than you're being treated. That's a hard thing to do. But I really do believe that David did it very, very well in this example. Friends, I know that this lesson hasn't been one that has taught us what to do to be saved, but I just want to leave you with this benediction. Keep going. Sometimes our Christian faith is put on trial. People will test our patience. They will test our kindness. And sometimes they'll do it multiple times. And sometimes the easiest and most logical thing to do is to grab the sword and not get the cloak, but hit the person. Sometimes the easy thing to do is not to just take the spear and leave, but to use it. Take the high road. Yes, because David took the high road and he gave us a strong example. But more importantly than this example from 1 Samuel, we have an example in the New Testament. Christ, who went to his own and his own received him not. Who hung on a cross as men gambled over his clothes and spat upon him and abused him. And he said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. If he could do that, if David could do that for Saul, then we can do it for those who do not love us. And when we see the downfall of our enemies, do not let that be met with a smile, but weep and mourn. We should never be excited for the death of someone who is not in a right relationship with God. That should break our hearts. It broke the heart of David. Friends, this is a great lesson. Hard lesson to apply. I understand. It is a difficult concept to live by. But that's why it's an example. That's why it's in our Bibles. Friends, this morning, if you are a Christian and you need the prayers of the church for sin in your life, or if you've never become a Christian, we'd love to help you with that. Friends, whatever your need may be, why don't you come and stand as we sing this song of encouragement.